Our listeners should definitely tune into this episode because it's an episode that listeners should tune into.
Hang on. That's circular reasoning. Actually, our listeners should tune into this episode because this intro is great, and therefore the entire episode will be great.
Haha, that is a classic versus flaw part to whole type.
But that's to be expected because in this episode, all the arguments will be fallacious. Today we're diving into some of the biggest pop culture debates of 2020 with only flawed arguments to make our respective cases.
Welcome to The Legal Level, a podcast from TestMax. I'm Jelena.
And I'm Branden. We're your companions on the road to the legal field, whether you've just started thinking about law school or you've already passed the bar.
What are you, a lawyer?
The Legal Level is available from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you're listening to it right now.
If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and tell a friend.
And as always, if you have questions about this episode, you can talk to a 99th percentile LSAT instructor by texting LSAT to 310-818-7743.
Or, if you'd like your question to be on the show, just email podcast@testmaxprep.com and we might answer you on the air.
All right, let's get into it. And by it, I mean the world's most fallacious argument. Now, before we start, listeners should know we've talked before the show about which arguments we'll be having and what sides we plan to take, but we haven't seen each other's arguments before recording, so our reactions to each other's points will be totally unscripted and real.
There can be no true winner here, since all our arguments will be invalid, but that won't stop us from trying to convince each other of our points.
Let's begin with one of the most enduring and impactful debates of all time. Is a hot dog a sandwich or not?
So is a hot dog a sandwich or not? Clearly a hot dog isn't a sandwich. And let me explain why. So look, you can make all these fancy arguments about how buns are bread, how the hot dog itself is like the meat in the sandwich, but really it's just semantics. This is something you can't prove. It's impossible to prove. And so since it's impossible to prove that a hot dog is a sandwich, clearly a hot dog is not a sandwich.
Hang on. That's an absence of evidence fallacy, and as we all know, the absence of evidence or the impossibility of proving an argument does not prove the falsity of the argument.
Oh, you got me on that one.
Darn right I did, and the truth is, sandwiches are a meal that is often made up of bread, meat or a meat substitute if you're a vegetarian, and spreads. And clearly, as we all know, hot dogs are also made up of bread, meat or meat substitute, and spreads. Therefore, a hot dog is clearly a sandwich.
Well, it sounds like you're comparing things, but I don't know if there's not some kind of relevant difference that's lurking there that would ruin that. Maybe the fact that the hot dog is round and isn't between two flat pieces of bread. I see many differences here.
It seems like all of the differences you're seeing are in shape, but you have accurately described my fallacy, so perhaps we should move on to the similar but functionally different question of whether or not cereal is soup.
All right, you want to start this one off?
I will start this one off because I believe that I can convince all of our listeners that cereal is a soup. Yes, that is right. I am switching sides on this one. I am pro cereal is soup. As we all know, solid food is eaten with the hands or with a fork, knife, chopstick, or some combination of the above. And solid food is also, while occasionally served with sauce, it is never served completely immersed in liquid. So cereal isn't a solid food, since it is eaten with a spoon and is served completely immersed in liquid. Therefore, the only option left is it must be soup.
That sounds like a failure to eliminate alternatives, because it could be a lot of other things besides some of the things that you have ruled out there. Have I caught on correctly?
Yeah, you got me on that one. All right. Throw your best anti-soup propaganda at me, Branden.
Very good. Very good. You know something? No soup for you!
All right, here's my anti-soup propaganda. So, look, I get it. You eat cereal with a spoon, you eat soup with a spoon. You put soup in a bowl. Sometimes you put cereal in a bowl. But look, you've got some dry stuff that comes out of a box. That's not soup. It's basically cookies. You've got some milk, which is a drink, and that isn't soup. It's just a couple of things that aren't soup. And then you put them together. Well, you're not going to get soup out of non-soup. And therefore, cereal is just not soup.
It sounds like you're saying that the parts of cereal are not soup, therefore the whole of cereal must not be soup, which would be a part-to-whole fallacy.
That is exactly the awful, terrible argument I am making on this very, very important issue. You got me.
Therefore, the whole of your argument, as well as all of its parts, are fallacious.
Yes, incredibly. But they do taste delicious with some nice cold milk on them.
That's true. I think we've made a key mistake in our podcast by putting our food fallacies at the top, so that now while we record the rest of this, we're just both going to be hungry.
Yeah, that's all I can think about now.
Get in my belly!
I'm hoping our coming debates are not food debates. And in fact, our next one, I think, is not a food debate. So shall we move on to that very, very important question? Is it better to live in a cold climate, or is it better to live in a warm climate?
Now, we are both recording this, of course, from a warm climate, but would you like to begin our debate with your argument for cold?
Sure. So here is my argument, and I think this one is very, very convincing. So, Jelena, I get that you like a warm climate, and I promise right now I'm not saying anything bad about you or anybody else who wants to live in a warm climate, but you know who else likes a warm climate? Satan.
Oh.
And frankly, it's very disheartening that you're aligning yourself with evil personified. And since Satan loves warm climates, I think warm climates are very bad. And really the only option in light of that fact, I think, is a cold climate.
Ooh. Now, given that you've called on Satan, I'm not sure if you're trying to appeal to my emotion or appeal to an inappropriate authority or both here, but those are both truly fallacious.
Yes. And one more thing I'm doing, although I don't know if you can count him as a person, is I guess that would be kind of an ad hominem argument. That was how I was thinking about it. But I think you're right about those characterizations also. I'm just fallacies galore on this one.
You've managed 3 fallacies in one argument, and that is fairly impressive. So I will give you top fallacy marks, however, not top argumentative marks for managing an appeal to emotion and appeal to in fact, the classically inappropriate authority, the inappropriate authority of the Garden of Eden.
He's the first inappropriate authority. That is very true.
Yes.
Fantastic.
The original inappropriate authority. Okay, I think this may be the first LSAT podcast to come up with a new nickname for
the
Satan.
First inappropriate authority. That's a very good one. All right, so you tell me, I'm sitting here suffering. I'm in the San Fernando Valley. I know 100+ degree weather is coming. Why am I in the right place nonetheless?
Well, you are in the right place because in endorsing living in cold climates, you've basically said that we should accept the possibility of freezing to death at any given time if we were to be caught outside without adequate protective apparel.
It's so cold.
And Branden, it is absolutely unconscionable to suggest to our listeners that they should risk freezing to death. And in fact, this is tantamount to podcasting malpractice. So, given that Branden's argument is that we should all possibly just freeze to death, I think it's obvious that my alternative suggestion that we should all live in warm climates is the correct one.
Well, that kind of horrific, callous disregard for human life is one of my defining features. I would have to say that I think what is happening here is that you have constructed a straw man argument, because that's not the argument that I've made. And so that kind of fallacy, while it can be very persuasive, is obviously the kind of reasoning that should be avoided.
Well, you've got me there, and you know where straw men do not last very long is in that the warm climate inhabited by Satan.
That is very true.
Highly flammable.
Yes.
Highly flammable.
Yeah, they won't live long in California either with fire season coming. Straw men beware.
Yes, if you happen to be a straw man, regardless of the amount of brains that you have, I do not advise moving to Southern California in fire season.
No, that is not the place for you.
Well, it seems like we're diverging from reality a little bit here, so maybe we should argue about the nature of reality.
Yeah, let's get philosophical. We started off with, is hot dog a sandwich? Now let's move to a related topic. Is reality a simulation?
I know this steak doesn't exist.
So what do you think? Are we all Sims?
You know what? We might be. It's an interesting idea, but I am ultimately going to fall down on the side of reality is real because you know what? The idea of reality as a simulation, it's given us some of our greatest movies. It's a perpetually great concept for TV, really great thought experiment to play with. But when you get right down to it, almost everyone on Earth clearly believes reality to be genuine rather than simulated. If most people believed reality to be a simulation, they would behave quite differently than they do now. You know, we place a lot of value on our little human lives that maybe we would not place on them if we believed that this was basically a giant alien video game where we can die and respawn at any time. Therefore, since almost everyone who has bothered to contemplate this question has come to the conclusion that reality is genuine, it must be genuine. Reality is not a simulation.
Well, as much as I desperately crave the approval of others, I think that this is the kind of thing that popular opinion really can't determine. And in fact, what I think you have done is I think you've appealed to popular opinion, and that is a big no-no. Am I right?
You are right. You're right. I have, in fact, committed the sin of going with the herd on this one. While there is a certain amount of evidence in a cow weight guessing experiment that groupthink can sometimes produce accurate answers, it does not produce good logic.
Is that right? Have there been studies done that groups guess cow weight better than individuals?
Yes, actually, there was a study in which a group of people, individuals, were asked to guess the weight of a cow, and then a group was asked to debate and submit a guess of the weight of a cow. And the crowd wisdom, as they call it, rather than groupthink when we're talking about it positively, crowd wisdom was better at guessing the weight of a cow.
Ah, crowd wisdom. I do like that name. Groupthink is definitely not a positive name for it.
Crowd wisdom is much better at selling pop psychology books about crowd wisdom, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, we all need a few more of those in our lives, don't we?
Absolutely.
So I guess what I should do is explain why everything is pointless and we are indeed living in a simulation. So I had to do a little research on this one. I mean, this is a tough question. So I called up my friend Wade. Wade has dropped acid at least 1,000 times over the past decade. And so he is very clearly an expert on pushing the boundaries of reality. And between just massive bong rips, he told me that we are indeed living in a simulation.
Man, I've got certain information, all right? Certain things have come to light.
And who better to know whether or not we're living in a simulation than somebody who has pushed the boundaries of reality so much? And since he is just an expert on the issue, I think we just have to defer to my friend Wade. We're living in a simulation.
Your friend Wade sounds super cool, and I might need his number because we should probably hang out. Maybe we can, like, all three watch a Pink Floyd movie sometime. But he sounds like a pretty inappropriate authority on the subject of the nature of reality. His extensive experience with altering his own mind and his own perception of reality does not actually make him an expert on, say, the physics that underlie our universe and whether or not those theories and foundational core laws and principles actually point to reality existing or not. It seems like he's more of an authority on exploring his own experience.
Now that you mention all those things, I see why maybe Wade is not actually an expert in this or really anything else. So yeah, I think he's an inappropriate authority.
He sounds like he's pretty inappropriate in a lot of ways, actually, but a really good time.
He is appropriately an authority on when and how to wear tie-dye. That's about it.
You know what? I did just get an email that declared 2020 the summer of tie-dye. So he may have a career in fashion, at least for this summer.
All right. Well, I'll let Wade know that his expertise is called upon in this difficult hour of need, the summer of 2020.
Indeed, indeed. Now, maybe we should let our listeners in on the secret behind why we're making all of these terrible, fallacious arguments this episode.
Yeah, let's take a brief break to remind you just why we are focusing on these fallacies.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message. In fact, I think it is awesome.
So, remember when your mom's favorite reason for everything was because I said so? Well, little did mom know, or maybe she did if your mom happened to be a lawyer, that she was committing one of the oldest fallacies in the book. But which one?
The ability to quickly identify the type of logical flaw in your opponent's argument is crucial, whether you're bickering with mom, conquering the LSAT, or ultimately changing the world. Our new prep book, 33 Common LSAT Flaws, will help you quickly identify different types of flawed reasoning and tear it apart.
Think of all the fallacious reasoning you hear on any given day.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.
So I shouldn't be scared or worried about any of the super scary things going on because that guy is a terrible reporter? You know intuitively that the argument is bogus, but the LSAT will ask you questions that test your ability to point out why it's bogus.
At the end of the day, you can't afford to let the bad guys, the LSAT, or your mom win an argument. Grab your copy of 33 Common LSAT Flaws today to master the skills essential to the LSAT, the actual practice of law, and life.
Now available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback.
Now, back to the show. So now that we have debated the nature of reality and the nature of hot dogs, let's perhaps turn to an equally important question, which is, are pro video gamers who are increasingly well compensated and showcased on a world stage athletes?
Are pro video game players athletes? I mean, Jelena, I struggle enough as it is trying to be proud of my own accomplishments, and here come some nerds who make money hand over fist playing video games, and they want us to call them athletes too? No. In 2020, my emotions just can't handle that. And so because I can't handle it, we're going to have to just agree that video game players are not athletes.
You know, while I certainly sympathize with your fragile and frayed emotional state in the midst of this current 2020 environment, I have to tell you, an appeal to emotion is not, in fact, a valid argument. In fact, it is a signature fallacy.
It is a signature fallacy, and unfortunately, it's the way much of our world operates today. And so maybe I'll take a step back from making these appeals to emotion. Maybe you can help me deal with this. Why are video game players actually athletes?
Yeah, I think I can help you with that, Branden. Because the thing is, ask anybody who plays video games, and they will tell you pro gamers are absolutely athletes. These people who themselves have actually tried to equal pro gamers' feats of hand-eye coordination, reflex time, and strategy know precisely how hard this is to accomplish. In fact, several surveys have shown that the more time people spend playing video games, the more likely they are to view pro gamers as athletes. So, in light of that, pro gamers must be athletes.
That sounds like it might be an unrepresentative sample, because you've got this survey going on here, but you're not just asking everybody about it. Instead, you're asking people who might have a particular reason. Oh, is this a bias sample? This is maybe a bias sample. They have a reason to believe that they are athletes. Tut, tut, tut.
You got me there. You just will not let me breathe here, Branden. if I tell you that everybody believes something, you call me out on an appeal to popular opinion, and if I tell you that a niche subset of people believe something, you call me on a biased sample. Who am I supposed to appeal to?
I don't know. I think in this day and age, you just gotta make random arguments.
That certainly that does seem to lead to success in certain arenas in society. But we will refrain from specifying which ones, as this is a lighthearted podcast.
Indeed.
Instead, perhaps we should turn our attention to the question of whether or not camping is a fun vacation or a pointless exercise in self-deprivation. And since you will not let me cite anybody's opinion to back up my argument, maybe you can demonstrate how to make a sound argument out of this great camping debate.
Yeah, so some people think camping is fun. Pitch a tent, roast some weenies, drink a few beers around the fire. But really, come on, compare that to an all-expenses-paid tour of the most luxurious palaces in Europe with a team of servants catering to your every need. In comparison to that, does it really seem fun? No, not at all. And really, when you think about it, with that level of fun compared to the amount of fun that you would have in this all-expenses-paid trip of Europe, camping really just kind of amounts to pointless, self-imposed deprivation.
Ooh, that is a peculiar argument, and that seems to some extent ignore the middle ground between, camping and an absolute luxury vacation, and perhaps also introduce a red herring. The issue of whether or not luxurious vacations are fun is truly irrelevant as to whether or not camping is fun. Were you going for a red herring there?
I was going for red herring. I actually have it down as, and maybe this will be a pleasant surprise for you also, I have it down as either absolute versus relative or red herring. So I definitely think it's a red herring. I also think it's absolute versus relative because something can be fun, even though it's nowhere near as fun as an all-expenses paid trip through Europe with servants at your beck and call. But again, it seems like I'm just doing a great job of packing the fallacious reasoning in. So I don't know if I should feel proud of myself over this or just very disappointed. One of the two.
You are just a nonstop fallacy buffet today. All you can eat.
Yeah, and in the era of COVID, you don't want to be a buffet at all.
No. Fortunately, the sneeze guard industry, now deprived of the ability to fulfill orders from buffets, has become the cashier stand sneeze guard industry.
Yeah, now we're all the buffet. And who's dining? The coronavirus.
Right.
Oy.
Oh, okay. Maybe Moran will put a rim shot there for us.
Yeah, this podcast has taken a dark turn. Very dark turn.
Grim. Perhaps we should return to talking about camping, that nostalgic idea of when it was safe to go outside of our homes and then sleep there.
Yeah, let's hear about how great it is.
You claim that camping is a pointless exercise in deprivation, but how can you make such an argument when you write novels? Everyone knows that novel writing also requires suffering for no clear purpose, and generally delivers no immediate reward. So, through your own hypocrisy, Branden, you've revealed that you actually already understand how something that may on a certain level seem pointless and painful could truly be fun and rewarding.
My hypocrisy knows no bounds, and you are absolutely right about this. And this is the fallacy of hypocrisy. The mere fact that I do something that is painful and boring like camping doesn't mean that camping is not itself painful and boring also. So, yes, all of these things are true, but I believe that is the fallacy of hypocrisy.
You're right, yes, also sometimes called to quoque, in other words, you also. So, to quoque, you novel writer, you.
Yes, me too. All right, so what do we... Oh, now we're on to... wow, this is a deep one. Immortality. Blessing or a curse?
Which is it?
Whew. So you want to tell me why it's a blessing? I'm really worried about it.
Well, I will tell you why it's a blessing, and I don't think you're going to be able to refute this one, because everyone agrees that a blessing is an unexpected event or happening that fundamentally enriches the recipient's life. And look, if you're immortal, you've got infinite time to accumulate wealth and possessions. I mean, even if you spend your immortality saving only $1 a week, after an infinite amount of time, you would end up with infinite wealth. Therefore, the gift of immortality leads to immeasurable enrichment, and it must be a blessing.
I feel like there's a correlation thing here. I don't know. I got to tell you, I'm kind of stumped. What is this? It's a crazy argument, I'll tell you that much.
It is a lazy argument. There is
no,
no
I said
fallacy of
crazy.
crazy argument. That too is both lazy and crazy. Unfortunately, neither of those are generally recognized fallacies, but what is a fallacy is ambiguous word usage. You might note that I have used enrichment in two senses in my argument. First, to mean sort of the general embetterment and wholeness and fullness of life, and second, to mean material wealth.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, and you know what? And bringing this back to why we actually do this kind of stuff, that is one of the hardest fallacies to see on the LSAT because they are very clever at turning that one word into two things. So that's a good one. You got me.
It is one of the harder ones to see, and I have a little quick trick that I can throw to our listeners to remember this fallacy. The clearest example of ambiguous word usage that you can think about and just have in the back of your mind is very similar to my use of enrichment. It's value versus value. A value can be a moral tenet of your life, and it can also be a price tag. So that's a very classic ambiguously used word.
I can give you the example, and maybe this is a little off topic, but the example I always give my students, and I think it's a good one. Here's my argument. I recently passed the bar exam. I'm a lawyer. Therefore, I'm a legal professional. So that means that if you hire me as a hitman, I will kill the target legally.
All right. Well, that would be podcast@testmaxprep.com if you would like to hire Branden as a legal hitman.
Yeah. Legal versus legal.
Times are tough out here. We got to get it how we can, right?
Yeah, you got to hustle.
All right, hustler.
Yeah. Let me hustle you with this.
Hit me with your argument, yes.
Yeah, with this argument about mortality. So here's my argument. Imagine living forever. Forever. How awful would that be? I'll tell you, it would be really awful. Therefore, immortality would be a curse.
You know what? That sounds like some really circular reasoning. That's you've told me that immortality would be awful because it would be awful. So I feel like you've just argued your way from the conclusion back to the premise and vice versa, and you could keep going on that circle forever.
Yes, and it would be a curse, an immortal curse. Yes, that is definitely a circular argument.
I see what you did there. You saw that I liked infinity, so you put some infinity in my infinity, so I could infinity while I infinity.
And now we're getting into ambiguous word usage.
We're getting into the exhibit fallacy. Yes. So perhaps we should move on to our next argument, which is much less consequential in most people's daily lives. Should we shake the ketchup gently to get the ketchup out, or should we whack the bottom of the bottle? Can you convince me of your gentle ketchup shaking ways, Branden?
Yeah, so I hear people say that they can't get the ketchup out, and I tell them, look, just gently shake it. It always works for me. It works every time. Just yesterday, for instance, like usual, I gently shook the bottle, and then I smashed it with a sledgehammer, and the ketchup came right out. I don't know what these people are doing, but obviously gently shaking it is causing it to come out. And gently shaking ketchup is obviously the way to go for that reason.
It seems like you're really ignoring an alternate cause of the ketchup coming out of the bottle when you gently shook it, considering that you also smashed it with a hammer. Could it not be true that the cause of the ketchup leaving the bottle was the bottle being smashed with a hammer?
Huh. You know, I never really thought of that, but now that you mention it, yeah, maybe it is the alternate cause. Well, if I'm wrong about this, then why is smacking it better?
Well, I used to be a gentle ketchup shaker like you. Last year, every time that I ate ketchup, I tried shaking the ketchup bottle gently to get ketchup out, and I was actually only able to get a sufficient amount of ketchup onto my food that way 6 times all year. Now, this year, with quarantine,
pandemic right here,
I'm home more. I'm using my ketchup bottle much more often, not going out to restaurants and getting those little packets. So I switched the game up. I started hitting the bottle on the bottom. And wouldn't you know it, we're only in July, and I have already gotten a sufficient amount of ketchup out of the bottle 20 times. So obviously hitting the bottle works better.
Is that a temporal flaw? Are we comparing what's going on between 2 years, even though there are different things going on between those years?
I think it might be, but I was actually going for percent versus amount there because I'm eating ketchup much more this year.
Gotcha.
So it is unclear if my ketchup hitting is actually getting the ketchup out of the bottle a greater percent of the time, or if I'm just making more attempts at getting ketchup out of the bottle and therefore there are more successes.
And that's what really matters, isn't it? The success rate rather than the amount of successes. Percent versus amount. I didn't see that one coming. You got me with that one. I was following you down the rose-covered path there.
And that is the dangerous thing about a percent versus amount fallacy. This is one of those that you will see in the news, in campaign speeches all the time. There were 200 fewer motor vehicle accidents on the road that we happened to close, and therefore nobody is driving it this year. Therefore, my campaign has made this road much safer. It's made auto accidents rarer in our town.
No, it certainly has not, Mr. Politician or Ms. Politician.
Yes, the auto accidents are simply occurring elsewhere. All right, shall we move on? What is our next great debate?
I think we have one more debate, and it is the most important debate in the history of debates. And that debate is this: which Disney princess would win in an all-out melee between all of the Disney princesses, or among, I guess I should say, all of the Disney princesses? So you first.
Oof. All right, well, I'm very confident about this one because I believe that the most powerful, the most ferocious, the absolute winner in an all-out melee battle of Disney princesses is clearly Mulan. When Mulan entered the Han-Xiangnu War, and shortly thereafter the Han Dynasty emerged victorious, they delivered a devastating defeat to their enemies. Clearly it was Mulan's involvement that turned the tide, since the war was not won until she entered. A princess capable by herself of causing the entire Xiangnu Confederacy to fall before her might can surely destroy any other princess who stands in her way.
That sounds like a couple of things to me. One, it sounds like part to whole. She was just part of that army. She certainly didn't do it herself. It also sounds like we might be treating correlation as proof of causation. She was around when that effect happened. I don't know that she herself was actually the cause of it. Do I have either of those right?
I was going for the correlation versus causation, so yeah, you got me on that one. She may have killed an evil general in a tragic fireworks accident, but she probably was not necessarily. Well, she might have been, but my argument doesn't prove that she was the sole cause of the Xiongnu's defeat.
That is very true. She is a heroine nonetheless. All right, so I'm going to argue for a princess who is reviled in modern day, or at least the story of this princess is reviled in modern day. I'm arguing for Sleeping Beauty, and here's my argument. Why, even though Sleeping Beauty seems kind of helpless, why she would actually win the melee. People think Princess Aurora from Sleeping Beauty was just a helpless damsel in distress, but she went into a death-like sleep and was woken by the kiss of a handsome, by which I mean very creepy, prince. I'd like to see any of the other princesses match that. Therefore, Sleeping Beauty would win the melee.
Ooh, are you perhaps equivocating between the ability to come out of a magically induced coma when sexually assaulted with the ability to win a princess melee battle?
That was not the one I was aiming for, and I think unfortunately what it requires is to think back through the entire canon of Disney, because there is another princess, and I don't know why this story is repeated, although thankfully it hasn't been repeated in the last 50 years, whose story was very much similar, which was Snow White. It was the same, fell into a sleep, kissed by a weird prince wandering through the forest, woke up. And so What I was going for there was
Oh, would
ignoring
you be ignoring a relevant similarity there?
Yes. That's what I was going for.
Aha, you're ignoring a relevant similarity between Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. Clever, clever.
Yes, they are two very creepy stories that should remain in the past. That is the similarity between them.
Now, I will argue for preserving the aspect of Snow White where little woodland creatures are just magnetically attracted to her generous heart and great beauty every time she goes outside, because that is the best life that I would like to live. But other than that, throw the story out.
You know what? I'm going to reveal her secret, which is that she smeared herself with hamburger grease, and that's what attracts all the woodland animals. I hate to break it to you.
Well, at least it wasn't hot dog grease, because if she had smeared herself with hot dog grease, she would have been making a sandwich.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, I guess that's where the rib shot's supposed to go.
We DIY sound effects. Well, I think that is all of our fallacious debates for today.
Yeah, and we've made a lot of invalid points today. But now let's wrap up with one valid proposition, and it's this. If you don't study flaws, then you won't understand logical reasoning.
That is really true, and hopefully today's episode helped to prove to you that studying flaws can actually be fun, and it doesn't have to turn you into that weirdo on Facebook who replies to every innocuously nonsensical post with, "Your logical fallacy is..."
If you need to work on this concept, remember to check the show notes for a link to the book we both helped create on flaws, 33 Common LSAT Flaws. As we mentioned earlier, it's available in paperback and Kindle.
Now, obviously, there can be no true winner in a fallacious debate, but if you'd like to let us know who you think did a better job of employing fallacies to push for their fallacious agenda, you can email us at podcast@testmaxprep.com.
And that's our show for today. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate all of your ratings and reviews over the past couple of weeks, too. Great reviews really help us climb the podcast charts so more LSAT learners can enjoy the show.
You can find all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. You can also send us a question at, again, podcast@testmaxprep.com, or record a short voice message at 310-893-6303.
And you can also check out the show notes for links to further reading and resources from today's episode.
Until next time, stay hydrated, study hard, and remember, plenty of heroes carry a briefcase.